Today, we're cracking open the cookie banner and asking the real question: who actually owns your data, besides everyone? Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, where we sift through the legislation so you don't have to. I'm Sarah, your guide to the weird, wonky, and wildly impactful bills sweeping our state houses.
And I'm Stephen, your resident policy nerd, privacy wonk, and occasional translator of legalese.
So, Stephen, today's episode comes with a cookie banner, and we are talking about data privacy, which has gone from kind of background noise to front page legislation. And it all starts with one question. What is data anyways?
Well, for a start, it's pronounced data. But anyway, it all started really when the EU dropped GDPR, the General Data Privacy Regulation, and California enacted the Consumer Privacy Act in 2018. Americans have been swatting cookie pop-ups like flies. But behind the banner is a serious shift. So governments, especially state ones in the US, are finally realizing that personal data isn't just about ads, it's about autonomy, safety, and power.
I can definitely understand that, and I have noticed that shift myself living here.
It really is. It really is. But the open question, of course, is it a good thing or a bad thing? So again, if we just take a quick look across the pond at the UK, so we have a very different view on all of these things, but we always have had really. We've always been far more relaxed about our government having information on us and spying on us. We quite like it. Actually, in a lot of ways, that's why there's so many spy novels and James Bond and all of that. It's great. So one thing you notice if you come to the UK is that on pretty much every pole and every wall there'll be a little CCTV, a camera that will be videoing you, and you've no idea where that information is going. Our roads now are covered in license plate recognition, speed traps to monitor your speed and fine you if you go too fast. So everywhere you go, you are being observed by cameras that are being fed back somewhere and recorded, and are getting better and better all the time. So certainly in America, people are concerned about this. In England, if you ask people, they just go, "Nah." For some reason, it doesn't bother us. It helps catch crime. One of the reasons why the crime rate has plummeted everywhere is the fact that someone commits a crime, they're caught on camera, and it's great evidence to convict them. So how can that be a bad thing? And then if it stops people speeding and saves lives on the road, again, well, why is that not a bad thing? So,
Well, I have to laugh at that because I love crime novels, and a lot of the best ones happen in the UK, of course. And I literally remember having to Google what CCTV was because I was like, this is like the third thing that's talked about this. I need to, what? And I was like, oh, like such a foreign concept, especially for me from a small town. But like...
But that's what it is. And so that attitude, I think, of really is concerned. We sort of know we should be more concerned about it than we really are, but there's just too many other things on. It never makes it to the top of your worry list.
It's interesting that that's something that's not really at the top of your all's worry list, with you guys being kind of the first people to take on this data privacy. And let's just talk a little bit about these kind of fundamental rights that GDPR put forth under its protections. So there's 8 of them, and they are the right to be informed, the right of access, the right of rectification, the right to erasure, the right to restrict processing, the right to data portability, the right to object, and the right to not be subject to automated decision making. So lots of rights that you guys all have now when it comes to your data.
Absolutely. But of course, the really important thing to note is that GDPR is a European law. And of course, Britain is no longer part of Europe. And when we did leave, through Brexit. GDPR was one of those big points that people were saying, well, okay, are we going to keep it? Are we not? And in the end, as with most of these regulations, we just ported it across exactly the same. So we have a British version of GDPR that's the same, because it turned out when people examined the various terrible European laws that we were hoping to get rid of, we found out that most of them were actually quite sensible. We kept them. And this was one of them. So we do have a British version with exactly the same rights. But again, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. All I know is that it's had certain impacts. So now, every time I go to a website, I have to click that annoying pop-up, which is really annoying. It's why can't I just click one thing and say, these are my preferences on all websites? Why do I have to do it every time I go to a website? I mean, I understand the technicalities of this, but it's still annoying. And actually, for people in Europe and in the UK, there's an additional problem, which is a lot of websites in the US have decided, no, we're not doing that. It's too onerous. So instead, we're just going to block all visitors from the EU and the UK. So I can't access many websites in the US, which is obviously quite difficult considering that's what I
Yeah.
need to do. So I have to use a VPN, which fair enough. I can use a VPN. I can still do that. But again, it's putting these barriers. It's making things harder. It's a lot of bureaucracy. Is it actually helping? That's the key question.
To your point of we're just wanting a basic set of permissions. And it's funny because the reason that they want to make it hard is because they want you to give up so that they can use your data. So it's one of these things that also is still by design. The data is where the money is, especially in the age of AI. And so they want you to just be like, well, whatever, like this is so annoying. If we were actually designing with our user lived experience first,
Yes,
then we would do that. But that's not where the money is. And that's also kind of why these types of things exist to begin with.
absolutely. I mean, and and I suspect a lot of people are like this. I just click yes on
Yeah.
these websites without even looking at them. I don't read the stuff. I don't
Right.
read what it says. I just
Right.
look for the button that says yes, and I click that, and I move on. Because who's
Mm-hmm.
got the time
Yes.
to every website you visit? Are you going to read their privacy policy?
Yes.
No, of course you
Right.
won't.
Right.
So is it doing any good, or are we all just clicking yes?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, it's the exhaustion. But okay, so let's talk numbers here. How many states in the US are actually considering something like this? We've heard so much about GDPR in the EU, and a little bit kind of has broken through here with California's CCPA, and there has been some over the last few years around different states, but what's kind of going on here in the US?
Yes, well, so California certainly started it, and any business that does business across a number of states will know that you have to deal with this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there warning you that if you don't comply with the California Act, you find yourself in trouble. Make sure that you've got your privacy statement and all of this. And
Yeah.
then, but it's not only California. Many states have followed their lead. So as of 2025, there are 19 states now that have comprehensive privacy laws on the books. And of course, in classic American style, they're all a little bit different. You can't just do one thing and comply with everybody. Who knew? No, you have to be familiar with all of them. So you have to employ somebody who can understand
Yeah.
all of this stuff. And just this year alone, we identified 64 bills that are related to this in some way. A lot of them are putting forward other comprehensive privacy laws or very related, maybe tweaking existing laws and stuff. So there's a bit of a privacy gold rush on.
Yeah, wow, that is actually a decent amount. And I just have to say, patchwork America theme of 2025 of bill beyond the bill number. But okay, so we've kind of gone from a should we do this and other people are doing it, maybe we should, to let's see who can do it better or different or approach it, I don't know, whichever way is more authentic to the state. But which bills should we be watching most closely right now?
Well, of all of those bills, the interesting thing about them, in fact, is that they're not actually making much progress. So perhaps if you are an opponent of these kind of laws, that will give you a bit of cheer. But there are two that have made it across the finish line so far. You've got Kentucky's HB 473 and Montana's SB 297. So Kentucky's bill is a bipartisan beauty, sponsored by a Republican, Josh Branscombe, and also Democrat Pamela Stevenson. It strengthens consumer protections, it expands exemptions, tidy, pragmatic update to their existing privacy framework.
And what about in Montana?
Montana's SB 297 is sponsored by Republican Daniel Zolnikoff, goes even further than that. It really focuses on minor data alongside adult privacy. So as with a lot of these, it's focused on how do we protect the kids. And it has an unusually broad scope, but it's really about bringing the state laws up to speed with modern tech realities. It's a standout for really putting kids and teens front and center of these kind of laws.
Well, speaking of kids, there's been a huge uptick in laws targeting data protections for minors. We've talked about them last year. We had COPA and COSA, COPA 2.0 actually. But what's kind of going on here?
Well, we're definitely in the post-COPA era. The Federal Children's Online Privacy Protection Act hasn't really aged very well. It only protects kids under 13 for a start, and we now know that kids older than 13 also need a bit of protection. But some states like Oklahoma with HB 1762 and Iowa with HB HF 503, are expanding those protections up to age 18, which I think makes a lot more sense. So I think age verification, impact assessment, limits on data-driven manipulation.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a huge push continuing this year from last year with kids' privacy online and protecting them and ensuring that we are protecting the youth, because it is a crazy world out there on the internet, and kids be being kids these days, you know? So some states are going kind of full helicopter parent, if you will. Didn't Florida pass a bill to shut down social media accounts for kids under 14?
Oh, yeah. So we spoke about this before, and Florida's really gone full throttle on this. So their law requires platforms to terminate accounts of kids under 14 and demand parental consent for 14 and 15-year-olds. So they're one of 19 states with age gating laws as of January. So you can look back at our previous chats about this or previous blog posts for looking for that. Obviously, we're all keeping our eyes on the Supreme Court ruling over the summer to see whether such age-gating laws are actually constitutional or not.
Right. And, you know, it is interesting because I do remember when I first made my Facebook, I lied about my age because I was 13 and made it, you know, back in the 7th grade or whatever it was. And I had to say I was 18. You know, you had to pretend that you were 18, but I just said my birthday was that year. And so,
Absolutely.
you know, it's not something that's super new. It just is done poorly, it seems like. But okay. Let's also rewind a little bit back to GDPR, where we started. Are we actually seeing American states build these kind of European type laws?
Well, in a way, yes. If you look at the California one, obviously Colorado has one as well that's very strong. So many of these new laws are giving consumer rights to access, correct, delete and control personal data. So effectively trying to do the same thing as GDPR. But the twist, of course, is there's no national law. And this is one area where you really, really do need something that's national, because websites don't sit within a particular state. A website is not state at all. So it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it really doesn't have much sense to it for it to just be national, to be honest. They should be transnational. But at the very least, you do need that national law, rather than what we've got here, which is states building their own. Some are very different, some wildly different, whereas others are similar. It just makes it much, much harder to comply.
Right. Well, and also, you know, being in Colorado, if I like move state lines and some other stuff, maybe my favorite website isn't adhering anymore. Like, does it attach to you? Does it attach to the state? It's kind of all of those really interesting things. Okay, so let's talk copycats. I know that you mentioned there's kind of a model bill structure in some of the red states. What's that about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we criticize the whole patchwork approach in the US quite a lot, but this is obviously one of the strengths of the system, where states can look at what other states are doing and they say, that works. That sounds like a good idea. I'm going to copy that. And that's exactly what's happened with a lot of these laws. So a good example of this is Alabama's HB 283, the Alabama Personal Data Protection Act. Sponsored by Republican Mike Shaw, it gives consumers rights over their data, applies to businesses collecting data from over 50,000 people, or if 25% of their revenue comes from data sales, and allows consumers to opt out of targeting ads. You can compare that to Georgia's SB 111 and Oklahoma's SB 546, and they're nearly identical frameworks, right down to the enforcement by the Attorney General and providing a 60-day cure period for companies to fix violations.
Okay, so no lawsuits from angry consumers, just sternly worded letters from the AG.
Yes, that's the idea. So business friendly, lawsuit light, but still regulatory. So in a way, finding that sweet spot.
Okay, so now I want to zoom in on healthcare. This is something we've also been talking about the last few years. We've definitely had some blog posts about it. Seems like there's a lot happening with health data.
Yes, absolutely. Especially post-Dobbs, of course. People are really nervous about reproductive health data, and states are reacting. So Illinois has two major contenders here. You've got HB 3494, the Health Data Privacy Act, and SB 2273, the Protect Health Data Privacy Act. Both ban geofencing around health clinics, restrict data collection, and give consumers more rights.
And Massachusetts and Minnesota are in the game too, right?
So Massachusetts has H461, which targets health data heads-on, while Minnesota's HF 2700 integrates health protections directly into their broader privacy laws, making health data sensitive data that requires extra handling. Seems very sensible.
Yeah. And let's talk about AI, always here when we're talking about data, because of course there's AI in one of our blogs this year.
Yeah, of course there is. Of course there is. Now, we spoke about the big beautiful bill just last week. Of course, within that there is a caveat saying that the government would not be allowed to create any AI regulation for 10 years, which would be great, really. I mean, we've already spoken about a lot of state level AI regulation that's happening or sort of trying to make its way through legislatures. Within this particular mix of bills that I'm looking at, there are only two real AI specific privacy bills. You've got Arkansas's SB 258. It's a bold attempt calling for risk assessments, opt outs, explanations, even providing for appeals. But that one did die in committee. Then you've got California's SB 468, sponsored by Democrat Josh Becker. It's still alive and it focuses on businesses deploying high risk AI systems, sets requirements for data safeguards and security programs.
So AI is kind of more of a whispered concern than a full on panic in this space for now.
Yeah, exactly. So AI regulation is the next frontier. And I think the problem here is a lot of states don't know what to do with it, and they're sort of adopting a bit of a wait and see approach, which might not be the right way given how fast everything's changing. But how do you regulate for something that changes every few months? So it really is this frontier, especially as it intersects with minors, health data, and algorithmic discrimination, which of course is another topic that we discussed just a few weeks ago.
Well, and it's also interesting because the health sector in particular is one that you would think could be helped with some AI with paying bills and things like that, and checking in your appointment and doing kind of preliminary screeners and all of these things that could make your life so much easier.
It's not. I mean, it's about making your life easier, but it's also about curing the illnesses that people have. It really is the big hope for healthcare in terms of developing new treatments, developing new drugs, and even replacing doctors. There's absolutely no reason why in a few years' time our doctors will all be online effectively AI, because if you look at what doctors do, it's the sort of thing that AI is really great at, looking at a lot of data and drawing information from it. So yeah, absolutely. But obviously it needs to be regulated really, really carefully because it's people's lives that you're messing with.
Was Dr. House the first medical LLM model? I'm not sure. Okay, so last question. What makes a privacy bill actually pass in 2025?
So yeah, well, we only actually have two data points to go on here, don't we? We only have two bills that have actually passed so far in 2025. Perhaps that's not so surprising given how controversial these bills tend to be, and obviously the volume of legislation in the US that doesn't pass. But they do seem to all exhibit three particular ingredients. So first of all, Attorney General enforcement, really, really popular, less scary to business than allowing private lawsuits, which of course could just open the floodgates. Then bipartisan sponsorship, of course, with all legislation. If you can get a bipartisan bill together, you have a much better chance of passing it. So I think Kentucky is HB 473 here. And then this idea of incremental updates. So bills that actually amend the existing laws tend to succeed better than those starting from scratch. So you start off with something small and then you build up with it over time. Again, seems like a very sensible approach to legislation.
Yeah, it's also an interesting approach, kind of a technological approach to things where you're enhancing and plugging into something that already exists. So that's quite interesting. All right. Well, the privacy movement is growing up fast, I have to say. And whether you're a parent, a teenager, a small business, or a doctor, or just someone who's tired of ads knowing your blood type, your data rights are evolving.
And thanks to 64 active bills and counting, the battle for digital dignity is just heating up.
Well, that's all for today at Beyond the Bill Number. Check your cookies, know your rights, and don't forget to read the fine print on BillTrack50.com in this blog post and look beyond that bill number. We will see you next time.